Hello and welcome to another episode of the Student Loan Planner Podcast. I am recording this before I know the results of the election. So since we don't have those results in while I'm recording this, I want to talk about a couple things that are always relevant, which the first is going to be listener questions. So while I was off on paternity leave, a couple people left some questions for the podcast. Remember that you can do that at studentloanplanner.com/voicemail. It's a great way to ask free questions. It's really something that I really enjoy, and hopefully you enjoy listening to some of these questions. They're really smart questions. And today's episode is going to be talking about why retirement accounts don't matter nearly as much as you think they do, which is kind of fun, kind of an exciting topic because, oh my goodness, people are so excited about retirement accounts. If I had $1 for every time somebody got excited about contributing to their Backdoor Roth IRA, I would probably be a millionaire. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but people love retirement accounts, and I love that energy. But the problem is that enthusiasm doesn't carry over to things that might be actually even more important than retirement accounts in terms of your long-term financial future. So we're going to get into that. But first, I thought we would entertain a couple of listener questions. So the first one comes from Andrew, who's a large animal veterinarian. Let's listen.
Hi, Travis. My name is Andrew Martin, and I am a large animal veterinarian located in central Wisconsin. I am applying for a federal program called the VMLRP, which stands for the Veterinary Medical Loan Repayment Program. This program grants $25,000 for 3 years as a taxable income to the recipients. The federal government also pays the taxes associated with the program. I have heard you discuss the pitfalls of employer monetary benefits in regards to student loans. As an individual on pay, I know that the added income will only increase my monthly payments. I have taken advantage of Wisconsin's community property laws and have an IBR of around 300. My question is it worth it to even accept this grant because of the ramifications it'll have on my taxable income / monthly payments? Perhaps you could extend this question to all federal or employer grants targeted directly at student loans. Thanks for your help, and I look forward to your answer. Also, congratulations on becoming a father. My son is 1 year old, and I am just thrilled to be a dad, and I know you will be too. Have a good one.
That's a great question. So the VMLRP program, there's a whole lot of forgiveness programs out there, right? And the key thing that I like to know about them is the income taxable or tax-free? I believe some of the health HRSA scholarships can be tax-free. It depends on the program. You really got to just double check what the tax status is for that particular employer grant. Most employer grants, most of these kind of programs where they put money on your federal student loans, most of them are taxable income. So then the question becomes, are you allowed to use these funds to reimburse yourself for payments you make on your federal student loans or not? So some of these programs are I would say these programs fall into two buckets. One's the paternalistic programs where all the rules are kind of forced on you. And the other one is sort of on your honor type of program where you have a little bit more control. So the paternalistic programs are basically forcing you to put all the money towards your loans as a lump sum payment. And if that money is taxable income, if you have loans that you need to go for forgiveness on, that's actually not helping you. It's actually costing you money, because if it shows up in your taxable income, let's say $25,000 of taxable income increases your payment the next year by $2,500 on your loans, right? And if you know that you have no chance of having a loan balance that is small enough to be paid off, then all you're doing is getting some of the tax bomb taken care of eventually. And that's probably not nearly as valuable as getting just lower payments. So I would say the thing is this is a very specific case. This is the kind of case where honestly I would want like an hour to analyze it, which is kind of why we do the consults, right? But we would want to look at it over a longer period of time instead of just giving a gut reaction. But my gut reaction is this person owes, say, over $200,000 of student loans. I would probably not go after this program so I could have a little bit more flexibility with my life in terms of where I worked and how I worked. But wonderful question. There's a lot of programs you can pair, like working at FQHCs. I think that they give a tax-free benefit that will allow you to reimburse yourself for IDR payments. So in that case, you can actually get PSLF basically with no payments. If you stayed at one of these facilities long-term, you could reimburse yourself for the IDR payments out of your loan money, pay down a little bit you have the leftover amount of money you can pay down your principal with. And then that's a way to get PSLF without having to pay a dime working at one of these FQHC, federally qualified health center facilities. In some cases, we see employers try to design their own student loan benefit programs. There is a limit to tuition assistance deductions, I think. There's a lot of discussion about making it so that employers can contribute tax-free to your student loans. If they do that, it's probably going to be a limited benefit. And so we'll see what happens with the laws in the upcoming year. We'll definitely update you if anything changes. But by and large, I've seen cases where a nonprofit hospital in the South insisted that a physician accept $100,000 paid out over 4 years of student loan repayment benefits when this person was going for PSLF. And the employer had to basically not get a tax deduction. The person would have taxable income, which would increase their PSLF payments. The loans were being forgiven with PSLF, so there was no kind of tax bomb benefit at all. So literally, the employer was throwing $100,000 away on the employer side, and the person receiving the benefit was going to have $10,000 more of student loan payments from this $100,000 of added income that they were going to get. So the collective loss to the employer and the employee was $110,000 for zero benefit. So I said, and they were very insistent that this doctor should accept this. And I said, tell them you spoke with a financial person and they told you that this hospital does not understand the public service loan forgiveness program. And therefore, the smart thing for you to do is to literally turn down this $100,000 and accept this job. And hopefully that will get somebody in HR that's 65 years old that designs these programs. Hopefully it will get their attention so that they can realize that this money should just frankly just go to you as a no strings attached bonus. And you can call it for student loans if you really want to, but really it should be able to be used for anything. So I definitely like to hop up on a soapbox whenever people ask about employer student loan repayment benefits, because a lot of the folks involved in the space have some sort of ulterior motive. I won't mention a name, but a lobbying group reached out to me to ask me to support this big push to make employer student loan repayment tax-free. The reason is this lobbying group wanted the ability to retain employees for a cheaper cost, because if you have a bunch of benefits that are tax-free, like employer-funded healthcare, for example, employer-funded 401k matching, it certainly feels good, but really it makes somebody just a lot more static and staying in that job, which is why these employers a lot of times will advocate for those kind of policies. Because if somebody could just get compensation, that's technically the best way to do it, I think. But everybody loves free money, right? And so some of these programs certainly feel like free money when they're just replacing something that could have gone into your wages. So that's why I didn't want to necessarily add my name to that lobbying effort. But I think a lot of big companies do support this because I think they do think it helps them retain their workforce. So I would expect something to happen with that. But in that particular person's case, just double check what the tax implications are. And if you're going for forgiveness anyway, probably better to not go after those programs. And now a question about making lump sum payments for student loan forgiveness, specifically for PSLF.
Hi, Student Planner team. Thank you for all you do. There's been a question that's come up a lot on the PSLF eligible physicians Facebook group, and I'm sure a lot of other people are starting to realize there's some changes. Basically, in regards to lump sum payments, whether it be through National Health Service Corps or just through your employer offering lump sum student loan payments, there's been some debate on some of these Facebook groups on whether these prepayments by a third party will count up to 12 months of qualified PSLF payments. I know they've talked about the Department of Defense counting on the studentaid.gov website, but it's not extremely clear whether or not a third-party lump sum payment would qualify. So I'd love to see if you've learned anything about that, because it seems like this has been somewhat of a recent change. So thank you very much for all you do, and look forward to hearing the question answered eventually. And congratulations, Travis, for the beautiful baby daughter.
This is a really fascinating question. I go out of the office for a couple months and all of a sudden the government starts posting weird stuff on studentaid.gov to make things even more complicated, right? So what this listener is asking about is recently on studentaid.gov, they posted something that's never been there before. And you can look at this yourself if you want to by just typing in lump sum PSLF studentaid.gov. And so on the studentaid.gov site, it says, can I qualify sooner by making higher monthly payments? Okay, and I'm reading verbatim here. It says, no, you must make payments to cover 120 separate monthly obligations. The thing is it used to just say that, but they added this next paragraph. It said, you may prepay or make lump sum payments, which would apply to future months for up to 12 months or when your next IDR plan is due. For example, it says if you recertified IDR, your payment was 100 and you paid 1,200 instead of 100 for your first month's payment, that payment would count as 12 separate payments for that year. You do not need to make another payment until the next 12-month cycle. These payments would count as qualifying payments towards PSLF forgiveness once you certify your eligible employment for the 12-month period. So what that's telling you is that this is a new interpretation that's never been there before. So what that's saying is, let's say you have one of those federally qualified health centers that I mentioned that makes a big prepayment on your loans. And if you're going for PSLF, according to studentaid.gov, then technically, as long as the total of that sum would sum up to at least the 12 months worth of the payments that you would have made, then you don't need to make a payment until the following year. So that's kind of an example of one of these sort of employer student loan benefit programs actually making it so that all you need to do is make that one-time lump sum payment. Now, the problem with that is FedLoan is not going to do a good job implementing this at all. So technically, the answer to the person's question is yes, you're allowed to make lump sum payments to cover up to 12 months of payments in the future. The way I kind of think about this in terms of how FedLoan would actually administer it is, let's say you make that lump sum payment and it says for up to 12 months, right? So let's say that you have recertified already and you have 6 more months of payments until your next certification date is due. And so you way overpaid on the loan because of some sort of benefit program or whatever. So I think in that case, FedLoan might try to say, well, you only get 6 months of credits because we don't know what the IDR payment is going to be after the next time you certify, in which case we're not going to know because we're not, adept enough to take that extra money and then apply it to the next 6 months of payments, which will be different. That's the problem that I think would have based off of the way the regulations are written versus the way that a loan servicer in the real world of chaotic programs would actually interpret it. So in other words, I definitely do not suggest doing this as a make your life easier strategy at all. I think that would be a disaster personally from an administrative perspective if you counted on making one-time lump sums every year to save yourself from having to pay it monthly. I think that'd be a big mistake. Now, if you have no other choice, if you are, for example, that person I mentioned earlier that was working for a not-for-profit PSLF hospital, for example, who they insist on the lump sum payment made. Now, the question was also, can third parties make this payment? I think yes. It doesn't say where the money has to come from. It just has to go into your account. So if a third party hospital makes a one-time lump sum payment of $25,000, let's say that your PSLF payments divided by 12 or less than that, and you try to time that $25,000 payment up with your first payment after you certify, then that might be a new way to get some of those PSLF payments covered, even though they refuse to let you reimburse yourself for the payments. So, if somebody's in a narrow situation like that, I think this interpretation really helps them. But for most people, I think this doesn't really change anything. Now for the main show, let's talk about retirement accounts and why you don't need to worry about your backdoor Roth IRA, or did you get every last cent into your 401k, or did you use your 457 plan correctly, or did you use the wrong one with your SEP IRA, or was it supposed to be the solo 401k? Oh my gosh, maybe you're already feeling nauseous, right? So let's talk about retirement accounts. So why did I want to do this episode? Okay, it's because I get questions all the time about, am I screwing something up big with my retirement? Did I mess up something? Did I forget to do my contribution to this account right? And I understand where you're coming from because retirement accounts are a big deal. You definitely want to get them right? But here's a very horrible confession that will probably cause my personal finance license to be totally cut up and thrown away in the trash can when you hear it, okay? Here's my terrible confession. I don't actually do backdoor Roth IRAs. I make too much money to contribute to them directly, and I don't really do backdoor Roth IRAs. That's not because I shouldn't do them. It's because literally I've been focusing on other things. And that might immediately make you think, oh my gosh, this guy has no credibility whatsoever. This guy is somebody that I should not take advice from, because if he's not doing a backdoor Roth IRA, then how can I trust him? Because that's the most wonderful thing in all of finance, right? So here's the reason why I say that. So people are more concerned about their backdoor Roth IRA than putting $50,000 a year into a brokerage account. I've seen this happen all the time, particularly with physicians that are really into looking at personal finance stuff, or dentists, people making a good amount of income that aren't necessarily personal finance experts, but they do really read a lot of stuff to try to do as best as they can. People are so concerned about that $6,000 never being taxed again than putting 10 times as much away for your future that's actually going to get you to your financial goals way faster, right? So the thing is, backdoor Roth IRAs and just worrying about your retirement accounts ad nauseum is where's the cheapest gas of the personal finance world. So the reason I say that is because think about how much money you save by getting the absolute cheapest price of gas. Maybe a couple dollars, $1 or $2, right? Now you might say, well, I get gas 2 or 3 times a month, or maybe once a week or something. And so that adds up to an entire lunch that I can get for myself over the course of the year. And that's the problem. An extra couple dollars on your gas bill for your car, it doesn't really matter. That's not going to get you to retirement except for maybe 3 hours faster one day, right? So that's not something that's worth spending your time and mental energy thinking about, because you have a lot of other things in your mind and things, unless you just love it. I'll get to that in a bit. But a lot of people, they focus on things for their personal finances where it's kind of being penny wise and pound foolish. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to pay as little as possible on things. I'm just saying we only have so much brain processing power, right? If I worry about 10 different things, I'm going to not be able to probably do as well in one of those 10 things, right? I'm going to maybe feel a higher level of anxiety, which might hurt my mental health, which might result in me, I don't know, watching too much Netflix compared to having a balanced running, exercising, Netflix, cooking, hanging out with friends and family, board games, whatever you like doing. And let me say this, it's maybe a little dangerous to tell the average American family retirement accounts don't matter as much as you think. That's probably a very irresponsible statement for me to say. And it's also an irresponsible thing for me to say if you are a public servant, if you're somebody that's doing one of those professions where your reward is in heaven rather than on earth, you know what I mean, from a financial perspective, right? You definitely focus on retirement accounts. They do help a ton. The thing that I'm simply saying is that if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have a graduate degree and you're probably above average income. Yes, we love our social workers so much, right? Where you barely get paid anything compared to all the work and benefit you provide to society, right? But if you are a higher income earner, then think about retirement accounts. Maximum retirement accounts, $19,500 for a 401k. If you look at a lawyer, doctor, dentist, optometrist, something like that, you might be looking at a 10%, 20% savings rate if you're doing only your retirement account. Maybe 15 to 25% if you do a backdoor Roth IRA as well. And that might get you to retirement at age 60, but that's not good enough. And let me tell you a little personal reason why. Okay. First of all, I think your goal should be to have the ability to retire at 50, even if you don't want to when you get there. And the personal example is I've been trying to schedule a PT appointment for back pain because I've been having a lot of back pain lately. Maybe that's because bending over and picking up a 10-pound baby really takes a toll when you do it hundreds of times. I don't know, but I'm going to ask them that question. But the thing is let's say that my back pain wasn't due to my poor posture decisions for picking up my daughter. Let's say that it was because I had had decades worth of standing over patients and hunching over and bending over and doing dental work, right? I cannot imagine being a dentist in a 50-year-old body going through back pain and having it being caused by my occupation, right? If it was debilitating, hopefully in that case, you'd be set up with disability insurance. And hopefully that disability insurance would come with a own occupation clause, right? An own occupation clause for disability insurance for the uninitiated means that if you were disabled and unable to perform your occupation, they'll still pay out. The thing is if you only do retirement accounts, if all you focus on is retirement accounts, guess what? Your money is all going to be locked up in accounts that you can't touch until 60 without losing a ton of it, right? In other words, I want someone to have a lot of money from age 50 to 60 that they can spend and have retirement be an option. Now, a lot of people will want to work until 65, 70 because you love your profession, and more power to you. That's wonderful. That's what you want, right? But the thing is I think when you reach the age of 50, if you can at all help it, you don't want your financial future and financial health to be dependent upon an insurance company's interpretation of whether or not you're disabled. You don't want it to be dependent upon current state of legislation that determines whether or not you can get your money out of your retirement accounts without paying a bunch of penalties, right? You don't want it dependent upon you enjoying your work and being able to do your job because you love your job right now, hopefully, or you at least like it enough, right? And there's no guarantee that you're going to like it down the line. So think about all of the older dentists out there that had to go through this COVID stuff. a lot of people that had the ability to sold their practices. And I'm not saying everybody did. A lot of people feel that this is their calling. They want to do it forever. And again, hopefully that's you. That's a wonderful success story in life if that's how you feel. If you're that person that loves dentistry so much that you're going to do it until 95, that's wonderful. That's how you feel, right? Most people don't feel that way. Most people have some sort of age they're ready to hang up the cleats, so to speak, right? And if you're in a position where you can retire, but you don't have to, say you're, age 53, and then this is probably way too close to home, right? But COVID 2.0 happens and we do shutdowns again in 2050 or whatever, right? You would want the ability to at least opt out of that without having financial disaster for yourself. And that's why you need to focus not just on retirement accounts, because retirement accounts can't touch them until age 60. Brokerage accounts, taxable accounts, you can touch whenever you want. And specifically, you have no limits on contributions to brokerage/taxable investing accounts that you can open at any place you want. There's no limits, meaning that you can contribute. If you're making a lot of money, you can contribute a ton of money. And that's the amount of financial assets that you will have that will allow you to put a lot of money into those accounts. That's the kind of place that you can go to and pull out a bunch of money to live off of if you want to have that option of making yourself financially independent and make work just a choice much earlier than you think is possible. Eventually, it would be really nice to drop all insurance, wouldn't it? Like where you just literally can so easily pay out of pocket for things that you just don't need to carry it anymore, right? I have to admit, for me, not everything's a financial decision. If my wife was in heaven forbid, a car accident, and let's say hopefully she's fine, but she totaled the car, if we had to pay for that out of pocket, even though we can definitely afford to buy a new car in cash, she would feel terrible about that. And so that's why I'm probably never going to drop collision insurance completely on a vehicle, just because I don't want one of my family members to feel terrible about themselves that they did that and and it all comes out of pocket, right? So there's some reasons maybe you keep insurance in place even past the point of financial independence just for emotional reasons. It doesn't have to be a bad decision to say you're doing something because of an emotional reason. My granddad has this harmonica. I hold on to it even though I don't really play the harmonica that much, not rationally because it's super important and I'm going to be the world's best harmonica player, just because I love my granddad and it's a wonderful memory of him, right? It's kind of like that. Don't beat yourself up over things. We're going to talk about that more later in the show. So everything's not financial in life. That said, let's talk about what is financial. If you want to be financially independent, which means you don't have to work unless you want to, personal finance experts will tell you need 25 times your annual spending in an investment account, like a brokerage account. Now, what if you have daycare expenses or commuting, or maybe you tithe to your religious community, or you have a huge mortgage, maybe because you need to have the right school district for your kids while they're school aged. Maybe you have a bunch of college expenses that you're paying for. So those expenses are not forever expenses. So you want to take whatever your annual spending is after all of the big, fixed, temporary, optional stuff's taken out, because that's your true financial independence number. So let's say, you spend $100,000 right now, but like $30,000 of that's daycare. Well, that's not going to last forever, right? And let's say 10,000 of that is miscellaneous kind of temporary commuting, business, travel related stuff that you wouldn't do otherwise. Your actual spending 60,000 that you would have to be really comfortable in life. So take 60,000, multiply that by 25, that gives you 1.5 million. So 1.5 million, if you eventually got that in a retirement account, well, that'd probably take you a while because you only can put in 19,500. So even if you have really good investment returns, you're going to be waiting a while to hit that 1.5 million. But if you want to get there a lot faster because you want to be able to have work be optional, work be a choice, the way you do it is you take advantage of your brokerage account, which you can put tons of money into index mutual funds in. And that's how you can reach that 1.5 million way, way, way faster, right? Because there's no limit. There's nothing preventing you from pouring money into that account to get you to financial freedom so much faster. Now, if you're below 60 and you pull money out of retirement, what's the penalty? So you have to pay ordinary income tax, which means the same taxes that you pay if you're working in a job. Plus, you have to pay a 10% penalty tax on all earnings for a Roth IRA. And then for pre-tax traditional IRAs or 401ks, you have to pay that on the whole thing because you got the tax deduction up front. So imagine you're in California pulling money out early. You could have 60% of your account wiped out in taxes alone. That's really intense. What you should do if you want financial security in a big way is build up that brokerage. I want to keep saying that. Here's a great little story, if you will, of just why this is important. So if you want to be middle class, not just temporarily, because a lot of people can hit a middle class level income and be considered middle class, but if you want to be middle class for a lifetime, contribute to retirement accounts. If you get a 4% match, contribute your 4%, right? That's how you be middle class. If you want to be upper middle class, max out your retirement. And the interesting thing, some people say you define middle class, upper middle class, lower class, lower middle class, working class, whatever you call it. Some people define it by income. Well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? Think about a NFL player. The average career length is 3 years, and the average earnings for an NFL player is $400,000. So if you take out agent fees and taxes, the typical NFL player after-tax wages are going to be $200,000 a year for 3 years. That's $600,000. Take away the spending that happens as an NFL player, that you're going to have to spend more than the average person, just because you're going to be forced to socially, probably, right? Just social expectations. So let's say you lose 100,000, which is really, that's way too low, right? 30,000 a year for an NFL player. You're probably living on 100,000 a year, probably. And so 100,000 times 3. So you're really probably netting $300,000, and that's it. So $300,000 is not a whole lot. So that's not rich, right? But if you look at somebody's income being 400,000, you might think, wow, that person's really rich. That's why you want to use those terms carefully, right? I think upper middle class means assets, not income, in my opinion, because income can mean whatever you want it to mean if you're careful about your tax planning. If you want to be upper middle class, max your retirement, $19,500, and also do all of the backdoor Roth IRAs, all that stuff. If you want to be wealthy and financially independent, and wealthy doesn't mean having a specific amount of dollars in the bank. It just means able to work if you want to, able to not work if you want to, right? It means having control over your life and not being dependent upon someone else for your finances. Someone else meaning maybe an employer or some rich uncle or something that's funding your trust fund. I don't know. So max your retirement and contribute anything left over to a brokerage account and contribute substantial amounts to that investing taxable brokerage account and index mutual funds. Now, if you want to do a backdoor Roth IRA, maybe some people got upset about that because their best friend is a backdoor Roth IRA in their mind. They just love it so much. Well, that's fine. My friend, the Physician on Fire, has a great guide online to backdoor Roth IRAs. So I would just recommend Googling backdoor Roth IRA, POF, Physician on Fire, and he's got a great do-it-yourself guide for how to do that. Ideally, yeah, do it all. But the thing is most people don't have the mental space and the mental bandwidth to, focus on all these different things. I kind of want you to get the 2 or 3 decisions you have to make about your student loans, about your finances with investing, and maybe negotiating your salary. I want those 2 or 3 decisions to be super amazing decisions. And then everything else, feel free to not optimize it, right? You don't have to optimize every single thing, which is great news, because for most people, it just kind of is exhausting to try to constantly be trying to find, what's the cheapest price on this? And if you enjoy it, that's fine, but most people don't. Now, just a quick point about backdoor Roth IRAs. To do one, it's fairly straightforward. You have to have all of your traditional pre-tax balances in 401ks or 403bs. If you have any traditional IRA or SEP IRA, something that's a pre-tax IRA, then it'll cause some issues with you doing it. So like I said, if you're interested in doing a backdoor Roth IRA, just Google search that term and you'll find a guide for it. The reason that people that do backdoor Roth IRAs are successful is because you took the time to go into a deep technical personal finance topic and understand it. In other words, it's kind of like this correlation, but there's not causation, right? You would probably find, if I guessed, people with backdoor Roth IRAs probably have much higher net worths on average than people who don't. That's not because a backdoor Roth IRA got them to that higher net worth. It's probably because people that would have a backdoor Roth IRA are a lot more interested in saving, investing, and a lot more aware of all the opportunities available to them. So just keep that in mind. If you're making $50,000 a year, saving anything is great. Having a 20% savings rate is going to do wonders for your finances. Keep in mind, if you're a lower income person, and I want to make sure we talk to that group, because you are very important if you're making a low income as well. Again, low income individuals are oftentimes people that are public servants, people that are just sacrificing their ability to make higher wages for the betterment of society, which thank goodness that we have people that feel called to those professions, right? So the good news is, for people that are making like $20,000 to $50,000 a year, Social Security is going to replace a way bigger share of your earnings later in life. So this still applies to you. You still want to put money into your retirement accounts, but I would still put at least a couple hundred to a few hundred a month in a brokerage account, even if it means not necessarily fully maximizing your pre-tax accounts, just because it's good to have that money available so that you can retire before the age of 60. I still think that matters, because in a perfect world, if you were able to save up enough money in your brokerage account, you could retire, say, at like 50 and then live from 50 to 70 on your savings, have nothing at age 70 left over, and then you could take out Social Security with a supercharged, much higher benefit for the rest of your life. And then you could ride out Social Security until you forget who you are, and then you could go to a nursing home and Medicaid would cover the full amount pretty much. So if you're making low income, maybe focus on doing things that you can, save money with, trying to find the cheapest stuff. It's probably a decent decision to be a little bit more conscious about being, frugal, so that you can have that higher savings rate, right? Because with lower income, you're going to run into Amazon being a higher percentage of your budget, probably. Your utilities will be a higher percentage of your budget. So then, therefore, it matters more. Do you turn off the lights? Are you careful with letting the water run? Things like that. But I'm going to say something that might make some folks upset. If you're a high income earner, you really don't need to worry about couponing and leaving the lights on. I mean, unless obviously for the environment or something, or whether or not you get lattes or how much, because it's just all very small stuff that doesn't really add up to nearly as much as making a few decisions the right way. So here's an example. The good news is if you enjoy couponing or getting free coffee to stick it to the man or something, that's great. If you enjoy it, then yay, that's awesome. Do it. Like, do all that stuff if it makes you feel good, right? But for example, my wife's a surgeon. Per hour, her time is very financially valuable, right? In fact, every time she watches a movie, we spend $3.99 renting it on Google Movies and YouTube, and then it costs us $200 of income that she could have made doing surgery, right? But that's not how you should look at it. You should look at it as, this is something that she enjoys doing. She wants to watch a movie. You shouldn't think about that trade-off as a financial trade-off, right? And she just made croissants the other day. It took her about like 3 hours, and it was so worth it. Oh my gosh, these are the most tasty croissants ever. She's on maternity leave still for another a little bit or so. So it's really awesome for her to have a little bit of time to do something that she really enjoys, right? Obviously, it makes a lot more sense to buy the croissants than for her to make them, right? And so from a financial perspective, if you're like, well, I can make the croissants for $4, or I could buy them for the same amount of croissants for, I don't know, $15, let's say. Well, you're talking about $11 difference, and the amount of time that you saved can be reallocated to leisure time that you would otherwise enjoy spending it or working, and then you'll easily pay for that thing, right? So once you start making that higher income, in my opinion, you don't need to worry about the small things. Even if you're, making $40,000 a year, you really want to focus on the big questions of your finances. The big questions are housing and cars, and maybe usually one other thing. So if you are a $40,000 a year teacher, if you drive a 10-year-old Honda Civic paid off in cash, if it's only you, if you're single, unless you live in a really low cost area, it probably doesn't make sense to own a house financially. So instead of owning a house, maybe if you do, maybe you rent out some rooms if you're single. If you don't want to do that, maybe you have several roommates, for example, right? And if you are married, then let's say two teachers married to one another, $80,000 a year. If you can find a house for less than $160,000, that's a great decision to go buy a house. And you might have to buy a house, like the smallest house in a good neighborhood. You might have to live a little bit on the outskirts of town to get what you want for the school district that you want. But those are the things that are going to matter. And anything else, like, do you stop on the way to Starbucks when you're going to work? That stuff isn't going to matter any. So it's just really kind of interesting how that stuff works. Again, if people did stuff only for the money, it would think life would be awful, right? We wouldn't have teachers, healthcare workers, right? Definitely not worth it. Even if they pay you $200,000 a year as a physician, probably not worth it for all the work that you do. You probably should have been like a tech person, right? All the people working from anywhere right now, wouldn't that be wonderful, right? Working in like the mountains of Colorado. I saw this like New York Times article about that, I think, of just how many people are just like taking advantage of working from anywhere right now to like jack up the prices in like resort ski towns. It's a pretty interesting world we're living in. So yeah, you definitely don't, probably most of you listening to this don't do what you do for the money, because again, it's just so much work getting a graduate degree and being a professional to do it just for the money. So what I really want you to get out of this podcast today is that you should not ever feel guilty about spending small amounts of money or messing up your Roth or forgetting to do a rollover or some random financial thing. Just another example. I had a couple recently thinking about upgrading their home to about double their mortgage payment. That is by far the most important thing to get right in their lives. If they're worrying about anything else, how much somebody spends on clothes or Amazon or something, that just doesn't matter compared to getting that decision right. And for them, if they want to retire at 65 and they want to live in a really nice home, that's a reasonable decision. It's not my place to decide what somebody spends their money on, obviously. So if that's what they want to do, great. However, if they do have an interest in having the freedom to not work by age 50 or 55, then they need to consider a couple things. Maybe they can buy the house, and maybe their plan is to sell that house, in which case, say you think housing might be overvalued by 2 times, let's say, in a really overpriced market. So then you need to pay off half of that house and have a financial plan in place to do that, so that you can get out of the house and not have it be an anchor if you're trying to leave the state to be able to retire early. That's the thing you want to worry about, not the small stuff. So one really good book is this, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. It's by Ramit Sethi. It talks about sweating the big stuff and not the small stuff. So another thing he likes to talk about too is the importance of negotiating your salary or trying to maximize your earnings. If you make a government salary and there's very little room for increase in your pay, or it's going to be inflation level every single year, or when you get promoted, it's going to be exactly 10% promotion pay, whatever, then yeah, your earning power is not the main thing. It's what you're spending on. However, if you do have the ability to increase your earnings, either by negotiating or taking a job in a more out of the way area, right, taking advantage of geographic arbitrage, then taking advantage of negotiation and getting pay optimization is going to be way more important than worrying about, am I going to Starbucks? Am I buying too many toys for my kids or something? I mean, that's what you want to focus on. There's another book by David Bach that talks about the Latte Factor, which is how a small amount of investing daily can make you a millionaire. And it's a great book. It's a great story. It's a great kind of analogy, especially for like the average American that might not have thousands of dollars to put into brokerage accounts every month, about how they can be successful financially too. The problem, I think, with that approach is, I think, again, it just kind of making somebody think, oh, the small stuff does matter. I mean, I guess the thing is it's helping you be empowered, right? Because even a little bit of effort has a big difference. And that is true. I heard a story from this very famous investor. I won't use their name, but they ran a giant mutual fund company. He came to my school when I was in college, and he talked about, before he ran the company, his dad ran the company, and his dad had this lesson where he would go out, walk around New York City during lunchtime, and his kid would ask him, okay, can I get a $1 hot dog at the hot dog stand? And he said, no, because it's not $1 hot dog, it's $1,000 hot dog, because we could compound it, and compound interest is going to mean it's $1,000 hot dog in 30 or 40 years. And that's way too expensive for a hot dog. But the problem is you can look at everything that way. That's not very healthy, right? I'm not saying that author above was anti-latte or anything. I'm just saying give yourself grace for the small stuff and focus on the big stuff. Retirement accounts, they matter, but they're not nearly as important as having an overall financial plan where you have peace for your loans. You're not anxious. You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing with your investing. You have a plan for how everything works together. That's what really matters. And so that's what we love doing at Student Loan Planner. So if you haven't had the plans for your loans as it relates to the rest of your financial life and your overall life, get a loan plan, right? studentloanplanner.com/help. If you need to refinance, if you have not looked at refinancing your mortgage lately, or especially your private student loans, you really need to. There's possibility that interest rates could really rise quickly if you have a really large stimulus bill after the election. Who knows? So if you need to refinance, in other words, if you could knock down your mortgage rate by 1%, or you could knock down your private student loan rate by even 0.5%, because you get paid to refinance, so you should refinance as often as you can find a lower rate. Go ahead and go to studentloanplanner.com/refi, REFI, and check out rates there. I've got more election stuff for you in the next couple episodes, so don't worry, we got you covered. And also, if you want to leave a question for the show, studentloanplanner.com/voicemail. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your week.